Welcome back to Plague Scythe Studios, everyone. Ryan here, and I'm back with my pawn shop rescue Ibanez RG350DX. We've already taken a look at this guitar, so if you're interested in a deep dive on that, you can check out the video. But before you do, I would urge you to stay around and take a listen to these new Dragonfire Hex pickups that I'm taking a look at today. And for this video, it's kind of going to be a bit of an op-ed on why I tend to not review guitar pickups. It's kind of a hard methodology, I find, to be honest and transparent with a guitar, say overdrive pedal or even an amplifier. It's kind of easier to make a control, to compare and contrast, see what it actually does on and off. However, when we're talking about guitar pickups or onboard electronics in general, you introduce a lot of variables when you're trying to compare and contrast, especially between like a stock set like we'll be doing today, because you have to play the guitar again. So you can't just run a DI through pickups. It doesn't work that way. You end up playing just slightly different, maybe a different pick attack, especially if you change strings. That could be problematic. I actually kept the same set of strings since they were like 2 days old when I put these new pickups on. But this will kind of be a demonstration as to why this is a bit more difficult, why I generally stay away from it. And my attitude towards pickups is I like them or I don't, and you just kind of have to try them out. So my review criteria will be largely based upon what the manufacturer markets. If it kind of does what it says it's going to do, then you can't fault them. It's true advertising and thumbs up for me. If it strays away from that though, that's when we have problems. So for the Hex set in a nutshell, this is an HSH set of pickups from Dragonfire. This is kind of a direct drop-in, drop-out replacement set for the stock Infinity 4s and 3s that were in this guitar. And personally, there was a couple things I was hoping to rectify with this purchase. Number one, I found the pickups that were in here before to be adequate. I found the output to be a good match. It's a heavy metal guitar. Kind of want higher end output pickups when you're talking passive stuff, especially if you don't want to use an overdrive. And I found them to be voiced in such a way that unless you're talking a really chunky amp like a dual rectifier or a diesel, most of the time you didn't need it. It was like a, plug straight into a Hot Rod Marshall or a 5150 type, and it kind of worked, especially with other, say, Mesa Boogie Mark or Triaxis amps. It sounded great. What I did not like about the Infinity 4s is there was this kind of brittle high end that, although at some points it was overbearing and harsh even, it kind of sounded like there was a wet blanket over all those high frequencies too. It was almost like there was a hard limiter going on, and I didn't really like it. The chord definition was certainly something I wish could have been improved upon, where, you strike one note and you can kind of tell there's individual notes there, but whatever's the most dominant just kind of swamps out the rest of them. And it's not exactly muddy, but there just wasn't a whole lot of definition. That effect was really pronounced if you play, say, for example, like an E9 power chord, and you individually pick the notes, but, let them sustain. That pick attack on each note just kind of got buried with the rest of the strings, and it just didn't sound very musical. So I was hoping is to kind of rectify those problems without changing the bass sound of the guitar. I liked what was going on. I just wanted an improvement. And I think I got mostly that with this Hex set. Installation was relatively straightforward, though their wiring scheme is a little different compared to some of the more mainstream manufacturers out there on the market. They do have the colors labeled on the box though for quick reference, so it's not a big deal. Everyone's doing a different color scheme nowadays, it seems, anyway. So that took like 10-15 minutes, and most of that was waiting for a soldering iron to heat up. So no big deal there. If you have anything that uses the standard string spacing that fits this kind of pick guard, or anything that uses HSH pickups, this set is probably going to work for you. Now, Dragonfire offers a plethora of pickup models even within this single HSH configuration. But the reason I went with the Hex set specifically is, according to the marketing materials, it should be the closest model to the Infinities that we are replacing in terms of their resistance, their output, their EQ character. They're pretty close, right down to the black pole color scheme. So this should be a generally apples to apples comparison, as good as you can make it in this sense, as we'll be comparing these pickups in every configuration, every pickup position across multiple amplifier sounds. So in the last Gear Curiosities, talking about this specific guitar, I made quite a few AX8 presets, and we'll be revisiting every one of those, changing nothing about them except playing this guitar with the new humbucker and single coil combination. So let's take a listen to those, and you can decide for yourself which you like better. Personally speaking, if I were to blindly listen to those audio clips, the last thing I would have guessed is there was a pickup swap, because the character of the guitar really didn't change that dramatically. And that's a good thing, because that's what I wanted. I wanted the Ibanez to still sound like itself. It's not like I wanted to put on passive pickups to make it sound like EMGs or something. But I was able to pick out, upon very close scrutiny, some of those improvements I was hoping for, like that increased chord definition. I find the single note picking, it is far superior. The overall feel, the dynamics, the just being fun to play, all these things that are completely subjective and I can't really measure with any degree of certainty, being a human doing these tests. I think it was worthwhile and definitely sounds better. On those high gain parts specifically, I really liked how these pickups stayed beefy on the bottom end, but not muddy, still articulate. And none of the mid or treble frequencies ever turned into an ice pick into your ear. They were all really well balanced, but again, had enough of that frequency content to cut through and otherwise maybe inarticulate amplifier. So I think the character, the marketing surrounding what these pickups should sound like is definitely spot on. Unfortunately, when you're playing out loud in a room, or especially on a loud stage, not just through a line level amp modeler like I just demonstrated, we run into some issues that directly interfere with some of the bullet points on the website. And that says that these pickups were wax potted to eliminate, or at the very least reduce, some of the nasty squealing feedback that you can get in those situations. And if they were wax potted, they must have not been left very long, because it didn't really work all that well. So I'm going to turn on this fairly quiet solid state amplifier. Definitely doesn't get nearly as loud as my 50-watt tube heads do. And we're going to see what happens. I'm on the overdrive channel. Gain is up a decent amount. We're going to leave EQ flat. I'm going to turn channel volume to noon, and we'll turn up the master volume. I'm here on the bridge pickup, tone max, volume maxed. That is just awful. And I would consider that bedroom levels. It's pushing it for bedroom, but easily, you know, jamming Home Alone type of levels. And it's really obnoxious with the tone turn all the way up. But as with a lot of these feedback issues, actually, the further you roll back on the tone, it's pretty much non-existent. But all it takes is just a little bit of microphonic feedback, and it's completely unusable. So the fix here would be better wax potting. I do have the back springs kind of dampened, so whatever might be picking up there should be mostly eliminated, but especially if you didn't have these insulated whatsoever, you'd be running into even worse problems than I am. So I've not got around to it, but these things are going to need another bath, and I'll probably end up having to spend some other time making sure there's no other vibrations on the body of this guitar. So that was definitely a bummer. It doesn't really interfere with the way I'm using it currently. It's mainly like tracking DIs with it for demos and that kind of thing, just to have a different palette of sounds. But if you wanted to use these pickups, and I would say this is going to apply to any of their higher output models, expect to spend a little bit more money to have them wax potted, because this is unacceptable the way they are currently. Now, one could give the benefit of the doubt and say, you know, maybe this is an edge case. Maybe this doesn't necessarily, you know, represent the entire stock of Hex pickups. But frankly, I told them I would be reviewing these. I asked if this set was the most apples to apples to the Infinity pickups, to which they agreed that they probably were. And that would make the most sense to kind of evaluate. So if they knew they were coming to someone who's, you know, kind of scrutinizing them, then I don't think they would, you know, kind of send a lemon. I would think they'd make sure they're, you know, up to quality spec. So I have a feeling this is kind of what everyone would be getting. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's not worth it. At $60, you'd be hard pressed to buy a single pickup coming from an old guitar that may not even be that good. And this is what the entire set's going for. And as I've shown tonally, in terms of their characteristics, playability, they sound great. I mean, I'm really impressed how well they mesh with this guitar. And it's one of those things where, in terms of sound, it kind of turns a, you know, a pawn shop beater into something that you're not so ashamed to plug into something better. I mean, if you're playing through an old solid state combo amp, you know, spending another $60 on pickups probably isn't going to make a whole lot of sense for people. But if you're kind of growing with your gear, and if your amplifier and effects setup is no longer your tone bottleneck, then it can absolutely make sense to throw a few bills at an older guitar and upgrade the pickups. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with this video anyways, put my money where my mouth is and show that, yes, it can be a viable route for some people. But in this case, just be prepared for that $60 and change to turn into a little bit more if you're going to have someone else do it for you, or if you're going to buy some paraffin wax and heat it up and hopefully not butcher it yourself. It's a skill that, you know, I don't think every guitarist should need to know, but if you're kind of, you know, looking in this budget tier of upgrades, then maybe it's something you might want to teach yourself about. So personally, I'm still satisfied with the experience I get out of these pickups. I kind of expected to have to do a little bit more work on this guitar anyway. It will be repainted at some point. It needs some body work, so that's really not a big deal to me. I enjoy screwing around with that kind of stuff, but it makes it harder to recommend this as like just a drop in, drop out, never have to mess with it again kind of replacement set. But still, there's something to be said for the value, for the price. I'm not sure how they make a lot of money on these things. $60 by the time you include shipping and all that, it's really scraping at the bottom of the barrel for a profit margin. So it's impressive. I'll definitely give them that. On top of the fact that, like many retailers, there's oftentimes some discount code floating around out there between 5 or 10%. I know I used one, so keep an eye out for that. If you have an older budget guitar lying around, or if you're just now getting into guitar playing and you're, kind of shopping in that sub $500 category, then it can absolutely make sense to take a structurally solid instrument and throw another $100 at it, and you make it jump up several tiers in terms of playability and sound with a set of new pickups, a good setup, make sure the frets are level, all that stuff, and you'll turn something from what most people would bat an eye at into a great instrument. And I think this is a good example of that. Also a good example of, if you're going to do that, be prepared to do some extra work, because there's generally a catch, and in this instance the catch is microphonic squealy feedback. But that'll be another day in the garage for me that I'll get to it when I get to it. So that is the Dragonfire Hex set of pickups, and also why I don't review guitar pickups, because I rarely get an opportunity to do kind of this equal comparison. And beyond that, it's so subjective that I don't feel I'm qualified to do it, really. But I did get a couple requests specifically for Dragonfire pickups, and everything just kind of worked out for this guitar. I said, screw it, let's see how this goes. So any other questions, comments, as always, please leave them down below. Pickup suggestions I will take as well, but probably not going to get to a lot of them. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.